All right, we're going to study some motion graphics now, and I'm going to teach you all sorts of different things. There's an unlimited amount that I could teach you, but we're going to start with easing, where we animate boxes coming across the screen, and they arrive and leave at different points in time, and they ease in and ease out. We're also going to animate text in a couple of ways, where we can control each letter, and we control the layers as well, the layer animation, just like we've been learning. You can animate lines and strokes, you can make bursts, you can animate the stroke of the line when it comes on, when it comes off, all that good stuff. And we'll get into some masking. How do you reveal things or hide things on layers? And then there's a couple of other masking techniques I'll show you. How to use two shapes to mask each other. How do you use something that's black and white to show a luminance mask? So some complicated advanced things. We'll use the puppet tool to animate a Photoshop document or layer, something that has transparency to it. We will also get into Adobe Illustrator and animate some vector graphics. We'll bring them in and we'll play with some effects. And we'll bring in a Photoshop file and we'll experiment with blending modes. Okay, open After Effects and you're going to start a new composition. Composition new. Go ahead and name this. We're gonna name every single type of motion graphics a different composition. So the first one will be called easing. Copy my specs, 1920 by 1080. Frame rate 23.976. Duration 10 to 20 seconds. And background, I'm gonna pick a darker neutral color. All right. So we have our composition here, easing, and we're going to start creating some artwork in here. All right, let's make a square. And remember, you need to have the anchor point in the middle. I'm pressing Y, deselecting, selecting again, just going to drag that over. I need 4 boxes, so I'm going to make sure that this one's small. You can pick whatever color you want. And now we're going to duplicate. Control D. And I'm going to color that one something different. If you have a stroke on here, let's say there was a stroke on that and I didn't want that, I would press Alt click or Option click on a Mac and then make sure it's no stroke. I just want to fill. If your layers get out of control, remember you can minimize them. Okay, shape 2, I'm going to duplicate that, bring it down. I'm going to color that and duplicate again and bring that down, color it. Lots of duplication, lots of repetition. Let's make that orange. Okay, we need a new palette. Open Window, Align. And if it doesn't show up for you, just make sure you plop it over here in this section. So Align, we're going to use this tool to let the computer align things nicely for us. Make sure the align to selection is an option, and you're going to either align left or center, and then you're going to distribute them evenly, horizontally, or vertically, sorry. So it creates nice even spacing. Okay, let's select the first shape. Press P to twirl down the position, and we can just work with position. You can also twirl down the whole layer, but we don't need to do that. Just press P. At 0, set a keyframe. At 2 seconds, click and drag the box. I'm pressing Shift so it goes straight over. And so this is linear animation. We have 2 keyframes that are denoting linear motion. I'm going to name this layer. You select it, hit Enter, and I'm going to call it linear. All right, second one. Press P again, set my keyframe, go over to 2 seconds, do the same thing. This is linear, but I want to make a change. I want this to ease in. So I'm going to select the first keyframe, right click, keyframe assistant, and easy ease, or F9. The keyframe should change. Now if you play this, I'm going to go ahead and go to 2 seconds, press N, so when I press play it's just going to loop this little section here. You can see the animation is different. The pink one is easing in, or it's gradually starting and then it ends at the same time. So that's an ease in. Let's go ahead and name that layer. Select it, enter, ease in. And let's say the third one. It's a lot of repetition. Press P. Keyframe. Drag it to where you want it to end. And this time I want this keyframe to ease out. So if you press F9 or right click and go to easy ease, that one's going to ease out. So let's play that. It starts fast and then it ends slow. Let's call that layer ease out. And then finally, this one is going to start here, end here, but I'm going to use both keyframes. I'm going to select them both, right click, easy ease, and this one's going to start slow and end slow. All right, and I'm just going to call that easy ease. Save my work. If you haven't done that already, I'm going to put this on my desktop and call this MoGraph training. All right, so that's easing. If you want to dig in further to what this motion is doing, you can get into the graph editor. So I'm just going to play with the top one, this very first one here. You can hide layers by pressing the eyeball. If I wanted to hide a layer, if I wanted to hide all these, I click and drag and I can hide them all. Let's just focus on this one. So if I select any keyframe in my layer and I go to this button right here, Graph Editor, I can see that there's a line. If you don't see what I see, this little guy right here, go to Speed Graph. That's the best one. Now you can click and drag these handles and make the motion change. This is velocity over time. So velocity is in the Y direction and time is in the X direction. So we got some coordinate planes going here. So we can make it ease in and out quite dramatically by clicking and dragging this graph. Just play with it. If you go into the other ones, if you select ease out, for example, this is the look of an ease out. It's gradually losing velocity over time. Linear, that should be a straight line all the way across. So you can tweak these keyframes to your heart's content. I would highly recommend using easing from this point forward. Starting another new composition, let's call this text. You can leave all the specs the same. I'm going to choose a more colorful background. That really doesn't matter. And OK. All right, so we have two compositions open. If you see your render queue here, that's OK. Some of you may have it down here. No problem. Don't worry about that. I like mine up here. OK, so we have a new composition called text, and now we're going to use a new kind of layer. We haven't used this layer before. We've used the shape layer to create boxes and circles, and now we're going to use the text layer. So you just click on this, and then you click in the middle of your screen. You should see a palette come up over here that's called character, and you might see another one called paragraph. But if you don't, you can always go to Window and Character and open it. So this box right here is going to show you all of the stuff. If you can't see it all, just make sure it's not scrolled up like that so you can control what you see. You should have a cursor right here, just like any word entry program like Microsoft Word. You can type. Let's go ahead and make this big and bold. I'm going to type the word text. All right, so you can move it around. If you notice, you put your mouse over the text, it changes to a cursor or a text cursor. But if you move it out here, you get this option of clicking and dragging. You can move it. In order to edit our text, you have to click and drag it, just like any other program. I want you to, and yours probably isn't large like mine yet, you can increase the font size. You can control the font itself. You can control the style of font and the color. So pick something that's that can really stand out. I'm going to pick just kind of a darker version of my blue here, and then hit OK. Just nice and big. And I want it kind of positioned towards the top of the screen, something like that. Next, we're going to animate something different. if you twirl down the text layer, the transform area is what we've been working in. Remember, position, scale, rotation, those things we've already learned. We're not going to use those right now. We're going to animate something else. There's a new twirl down for text, and to the right of it, you'll see an animate button. So you hit this little circled triangle, and we're going to animate opacity. And what we can do, we can control the opacity of each letter. This is special for text layers, so it doesn't really happen anywhere outside of using text. You get this range selector right here and the opacity. The tricky part is that you have to set the initial value for your opacity. Dial it down to 0. Twirl down the range selector, and you're going to animate the start. That's all you're going to animate. So at 0, click the stopwatch, go to 2, and then you dial this up to 100. And you can see that it's animating. If you animate the opacity here, that is controlling the entire layer's opacity, and it's not going to function right. So you got to follow those exact steps. It's very precise. Okay, I'm going to duplicate my layer. So I select it and press Control D, and I click and drag this down. Go ahead and change the, I'm going to change the font back to regular, and I'm going to change the color to something a little different that stands out. There we go. Now, since I duplicated this, all my animation should be the same. And I'm hitting U on my keyboard to reveal any keyframes. What I want to do is I want to take away what I've animated on text layer 2. So I need to take away the range selector, or the animator. So what you do is you twirl down text 2 and you go down until you see animator 1. You select it and you press delete. Now it's just text. We're going to add a different type of animator. Same menu, but this time we're going to animate scale. And now we can scale each letter, just like the opacity. Same routine. Set your initial starting point for the scale. I'm going to hit 0 and enter. Twirl down your range selector. We're going to animate the start value. Keyframe at 0. Dial up start at 2 seconds or wherever your endpoint might be. And you can see that it's animating the scale. It's just a different type of animation. So make sure you're animating the start value. Let's add a little more animation to this one. So I'm going to twirl up my text box. Now I'm going to dive into the transform area. We haven't really animated that. So I'm going to animate the position of that. So I'm going to put a keyframe at 0 and another one at 2. Go back to 0, and I can drag my little anchor point. That's not what I want. So if you can't quite get it, I'm going to press on my keyboard, Shift left arrow. That's what I want it to do. So it's going to come from the left. What if I want it to fade in too? Opacity of the entire layer can be animated. So I'm just entering a couple of keyframes. I want it to start at 0% and go to 100%. So now we're adding all sorts of animation. So we have text animation. If I press U, I can see the keyframes that are being animated. And then I also have position and opacity. So 3 things are being animated in different ways. Then you can work with easing if you want to. Let's say we want this to ease out. Select a keyframe, F9. Now you get this thing that's going to ease out when it comes in there. And again, you can tweak the graph editor if you like. Play it back. That looks kind of cool. There you go. That's how you animate text. All right, we're going to make another composition. This one's going to be called line. I'm going to choose a different background again, and I'm actually going to make this one neutral, but kind of maybe a little lighter, something like that. Now, if you noticed over here, we're starting to get some more compositions. Things are starting to get a little messy, and they will get very messy unless you get a handle on it right now. This button right here is a folder. When you click it, you can name it. Let's call these compositions or comps. I like to call them comps. And then you can click and drag all of your comps into this folder. And now you're organizing. Just like your folder on your desktop, you can organize it within your project as well. We'll need to do this as we start getting more and more assets brought in to this program. Okay, so let's focus on line this time. We've used the shape tool, we've used the text tool, and now we're going to use the pen tool. The pen tool is a little funky. It's a lot funky. When you draw, it's going to fill or stroke based on your colors here. So you can see if I was to draw, it would have a fill and no stroke. So the stroke is the outline and the fill is the inside. So I'm going to fix this before I even draw. Alt-click, 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 no fill. And then stroke, I'm going to pick some cool color like that. And I'm going to set my thickness to, let's say, 40. So if you do that at the beginning, it's going to, when you click, it's going to put a line on the stroke. Now if it had a fill, let's say, and you started to draw, it would fill in the middle and it wouldn't look right to you. So you can always change that after the fact. You can alt-click and set that to no fill after you're done drawing. So not a big deal. So we're going to start again. The pen tool's hard to get used to. If you click and let go, if you click and let go and then you click again, it's going to draw a straight line. You can continue that and do straight lines all you want. Once you click and hold, then you can draw out Bezier handles and have a smooth curve. But they get a little tricky, and it's just going to take you some practice. So I want you to draw some crazy shape on here. You don't have to end where you began, just something like that. Then you can also control these handles afterwards. So if you want to recurve them, you just click on the point and recurve them. Okay, then we're going to modify the line. Let's actually name this thing. Let's just name this stroke. It's nice to be organized. Twirl this down, twirl contents down, shape, and then stroke. Lots of subsets. You got to keep track of where these things are. The line cap is where the end of the line is. So this is called a butt cap, and you can change that. Let's change that to round. And you can notice it's a nice rounded point. You can also change the corners if you want to. This is a miter, kind of like in woodshop. You can change it to round. It's very subtle, but it does change. It's kind of a nice touch. You can control color opacity and stroke width from here as well. You can add dashed lines and all sorts of other things here, but we're not going to focus on that. We're going to animate the stroke. Okay, right here it says add. Similar to how we did text, you're going to add an animation that is called trim paths. There's so many things here, but we're going to focus on just a couple in this lesson. Trim paths. Okay, you get trim paths here. Scroll down. At 0, you're going to hit the start button. Start stopwatch. Go to 2 seconds. And then dial that up to 100. And you can see that the animation is happening. So you can control all sorts of stuff here. Let's actually set this to 100 at the beginning and then go to the end and set that to 0. So you can control how this thing animates like that as well. I'm going to go backward in time a little bit, and then I'm going to animate the end. So I don't know, about 107 or 8 or so. And then maybe to 3 seconds, I'm going to dial that down to 0 and see what happens. So it's really just going to take some playing on your part of what you can do with trim paths. That's kind of cool. You can also, select maybe both of these keyframes and ease them and see what happens there. Press N at 3. So it eases in and out. Kind of a nice look. Okay. I'm going to twirl this down. I'm actually going to hide this layer because I'm going to do another type of line animation, and I'm going to start kind of fresh. If you press the apostrophe button next to the enter key on your keyboard, you get this grid. This is the title safe region. You can also access it from here, title safe. I use this for the center of the frame. Really, that's what I use it for. I'm going to zoom into the center of the frame a little bit. And you know, my layer's hidden. It's still there, but I'm hiding it. And I'm not on it. I don't have it selected. It's not highlighted like that. So I'm going to click here. With my pen tool, I'm going to click right in the middle. And I'm press shift and click straight up. And I'm going to get another line that's colored just the way my last one was. Let's go ahead and change that color. I'm going to change it to some crazy color. Change the caps again. I prefer round caps. Okay, and we're going to access this right here, path. Okay, this is a path. It has 2 points. It has 1 point here and 1 point. Let me get my move tool. And 1 point here. And in between is a path. We can animate that path, and we can animate any point. So set a keyframe at 0, and let's go to 1 second, and we're going to pull the top point up, go to 2, pull the bottom point up like that. And I think at 0, I'm actually going to change this down there. So it's going to start right in the center. It's going to go here, and it's going to go there. I'm going to press N, so that's all I got. Okay? So just work on animating those points. And then I'm going to tweak this. I want the center of this to be kind of an ease. So I'm going to hit F9. See what that looks like. Okay, so it's easing. I'm going to get into my graph editor and really make that really dramatic. Here's another thing you can do. You can bring up the velocity so it doesn't stop really moving. Okay, another thing I can do is I can make it a little quicker if I want to. I can kind of retime it. And then let's go ahead and press N here. All right. So you got to get this one thing right. Just get this one line right, because we're going to duplicate this radially and we're going to have a burst. So make sure this one looks good to you before you do anything further. All right. Next, I'm going to add another type of animation. Last time we did trim paths. We're going to do a repeater. And it gives you a repeater right here. Notice you get 3 across the board. We don't want it to repeat that way. So it's repeating 3, and if I twirl down my transform repeater, these things right here. So it's repeating 3 times, and it's repeating in the X position. So you can kind of see what it's doing. Let's enter 6. Let's change the position to 0 because we don't want it to repeat that way. We want it to repeat in the rotation. So if you click and dial this over, you can see, all right, it's going to repeat radially, but we want it to do it exactly. So you can eyeball it, or you can say, all right, 6 copies around a circle would be 360 degrees divided by 6. So you can actually do math in this program as well. And that's a burst. If you ever want to go back and tweak the keyframes here, you could do that. It's only going to tweak that one, so you can edit. It's kind of cool. There you go. You just created a burst. I would encourage you to play with all of these things that are there. There's so many there. It's kind of hard to keep track of. If you want to name your layer, you could call this burst. And then you could use this burst later on in any animation. Okay, so that's animating on a stroke and creating a burst. Okay, so just to note, when you save your After Effects file, you're going to get this type of icon, .aep, that's your After Effects file. Then you might get a folder with it that has auto saves, which is really nice. In case you crash, you don't lose a ton of work. You can turn this off or on. You don't have to keep this file. They're just backups. So, but it's nice to have those with your work. What I'm going to do is I'm going to close my After Effects file completely. I'm going to quit After Effects, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to start making a little bit of organization. I'm going to make a new folder and call this MotionGraphics Training. I'm going to pop both of these into there and open that. I'm going to start making a couple of new folders. I'm going to make one folder called Graphics. Yeah, let's go with that for now. On the network folder, you're going to have the opportunity to download some graphics into this folder, and we're going to start importing them into After Effects. So this is new, and you have to set your folder up first before you start importing. Do not do it the opposite way because you'll lose things. Okay, so I'm going to bring a couple of things in. Let's see. What are we doing here? I'm going to go ahead and bring all these in there. Make a copy into the graphics folder. Don't mind me. Okay, so what I want you to look for on the marketing shared, or sorry, the animation shared folder is, let's do, go ahead and look for the training file, and under MotionGraphics, there's a folder called Spy versus Spy. You can just drag and drop that folder into your graphics folder. And then inside of that, you should have two JPEG files, Spy 1 and Spy 2. Okay, so just make sure that they're in your folder somewhere. Okay, do not pull them directly from the marketing folder into your After Effects file. That would be bad. All right, so I'm going to open my MotionGraphics project again. Everything is getting more organized. The more organized you can be, the better you're going to be as an animator. Okay, it's going to open up, and we're going to start a new composition again. Let's call this Masking 1. And background doesn't matter on this one. Okay. In our project window here, we are organized here as well. We're going to import a couple of images. So I can double click in here or File Import. I'm going to find that folder that I made, MotionGraphics Training, Graphics, and then Spy versus Spy, and I can click and drag both of them, or I can control click one and the other, but I want to open both of them. Okay, so now you have them here. I would start getting yourself organized here too. I'm going to make another folder called Graphics, GFX. I'm going to drag both of those in there. Okay, so anytime I drag graphics in, they're going to be here. So again, to reiterate, now that we've imported, do not move this folder. You can't move it. After Effects will get very confused, so do not move it. Okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to import one graphic. I'm just going to drag it down here. And then I'm going to drag the other one below it. You can't see the second one, but if you hide the first one, you can see that there's two graphics. But the top one is hiding, is basically over top of the second one. So these are layers, just think of them as a stack. If I click and drag the first one, you can see that the second one is there, but it's just on top. What I want to do is I want to mask the first one and reveal the second one. Okay, so I select the layer. Let's select Spy 1. And you can mask a lot of ways, but I'm just going to show you a simple way. I'm going to double click on the rectangle tool, and it puts this yellow line around my layer, and it also adds a mask right here. This mask can be animated, or you can just simply drag things around. This is basically a path, kind of like what we did with the stroke. So if I click and drag around one of them, I can see that it is masking the top layer and revealing the second layer. That's all that's happening, and we can animate this very easily. Okay, so you just click on the stopwatch for mask path. Let's go to 1 second, and then animate this corner over here. And that's all that's happening right there. If you want to, I'm going to use the pen tool, and I'm going to drag this make this a curve. By pressing Alt and clicking on a line, it creates a curve. And you can see that that's animatable as well. So that can create some pretty interesting stuff there. So just 2 keyframes, and we basically have a transition from one scene to the next. You can also, of course, add easing. It's kind of nice. So that is masking number 1. Start a new composition for masking 2. And let's see. We're going to make this out of just some boxes. So what you can do is you can mask shapes or layers with layers above it. And this is going to be kind of confusing, but give it a shot. Let's draw a square. I want that to be filled with something. I'm just going to take away the stroke. And I'm going to center that anchor point as we have learned. Okay, I'm going to name this box 1 just to try to keep track of this thing. I'm then going to hit S for scale, click a keyframe, and maybe at 2 seconds click another keyframe. And then I'm going to animate the scale. Let's go from like small to big. And then let's ease it. All right. I'm going to hit N at 3 seconds. So we basically have a box scaling up and easing it. All right. I'm going to duplicate that layer. Color this something different, kind of temporarily. Now we have 2 boxes. Of course, I can only see the top one, this one right here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to drag this layer forward in time a little bit. If I hit U, you can see the keyframes are happening in a different place. And I'm going to zoom in, and I'm actually going to make this box tinier to begin with and larger to end with. So it should look something like this. Maybe you offset it even more. Something like that. So what I want to do is I want this yellow box or orange box to be masked by the top layer or the layer above it. So it's actually going to cut a hole through it. The way you do that is right here. So the layer underneath, this is exactly how you have to do it. Layer underneath needs to be set to alpha matte or inverted. You might mess with those 2 settings and see what you like. Mine I want to be inverted, so it actually cuts a hole through it. And that's what happens. It masks it with the shape. Notice it turns off the layer. You can't see it, so it's hidden. And there's some other things that are happening here. So if you ever needed to get it back, you need to set this to none and then turn this layer on again. So again, you just hit alpha inverted or alpha matte and it will cut a hole through your shapes. This third type of masking is interesting. You'll need to pull in from the animation shared folder, training files, go under MotionGraphics and find the matte folder. You can pull this whole folder over or just the transition.mp4. This is actually a video, so you'll need to save it to your project folder that you have on your desktop. Somehow, some way, you'll need that file. Go back into After Effects and we're going to import it. So again, File, Import, or double click in here, and then you're going to find that file and import it. Okay, you hit OK and it's going to import a video. Again, I'm just going to put it in graphics, that's fine. It's actually a video. You can make another folder for videos if you want to. Composition new, and we're going to call this masking 3. And let's make this background, kind of colorful. All right. Okay, actually, the background doesn't matter, but I'm gonna make a solid. A solid is something that is basically just a rectangle. So new solid, You can do that from here or layer new solid. I'm just going to call this layer 1 and pick some bright color. Hit OK. And then I'm going to do another one, layer new solid. Let's call this layer 2. Pick a different color. All right, so we have 2 layers. Again, you can only see the top one because it is completely hiding the other one. All right. So then I'm going to drag my transition video on top. So I should have 3 layers. And so what this is if you scrub, what this is this video goes from black to white, but there's a transition. I just found this on YouTube somewhere. But in between there are versions of gray because of the transition. So we're going to use another type of mask basically that senses black, white, and gray. First we need to make this large, so I'm going to hit Shift and drag a corner and make this bigger than my frame. I'm going to go to 5 and hit N, so this is my complete timeline. All I can see is this top transition. All right. And then I'm going to go to layer 2. Again, it's below transition. I'm going to hit where it says none. I'm going to go to Luma Matte Transition. Okay, so it's going to use the color of the layer as basically what is turning black. And then it's going to reveal or hide the layer below it. So there's several things happening. We got the pink layer below it that's being revealed because this video layer is basically it's basically black right here. And then when the video becomes white, it hides it. So it's pretty complex what's happening, but it's a pretty neat effect. A Luma Matte is something that bases it off of black, white, and gray. We're going to learn about the Puppet tool, but first we need a graphic to work with. So we're going to pull in a Photoshop file. We haven't used Photoshop yet. We're not going to really dig into it quite yet, but you'll need to import the Octopus PSD file. So go ahead and save this folder to your graphics folder first. And then if you would, go ahead and just double click on the octopus.psd and it should open this image. A couple of things to look at. We have an image here. These are made of pixels. If I zoom way in, I can see that there are actually squares there. Those are pixels. So this is bitmap artwork. Also, I've sized this thing to work for us. These are pixel counts right here, and this is resolution. Resolution is important. 72 pixels per inch is great for television. It'll work just fine. We don't need much more than that. This checker pattern means it's transparent. So if I put a color behind it, I would be able to see the octopus. That is a craft into itself. We won't worry about it quite yet. You can close that and Photoshop if you have it open. Go ahead and get back into After Effects, and we're going to start a new composition, and we're going to call this Puppet. Let's create a background that might look kind of like the ocean. We'll have to mess with that. Hit OK, and then we're going to import that octopus file. Get a window here. How do you want to import it? And there's all sorts of options here. So when you just have a Photoshop file that's one layer, use footage. If you had multiple layers, which is something we'll talk about later on, you could use this. But for now, just keep it as footage. That's totally fine. And it brings in an octopus file. Again, I'm going to put it in my graphics folder. Keep myself organized. Just click and drag this down to your timeline, and there's your octopus. If it looks like mine, not very good quality, you can click on this button that says quarter and hit full. So that's the full quality. Notice that it's transparent. That checkerboard pattern meant that you could see through it. So that's pretty important, and prepping an image for this can take some time, but again, we'll worry about that later. Okay, I'm going to zoom into my octopus a little bit, and what I want is maybe one of these tentacles to move. We'll just focus on one. Right here we have a pin, and so if I click on this, and I click on, let's say, the center of my octopus, it puts this little yellow dot here, and it puts this mesh around the octopus. I can control the expansion of that mesh, how far outside of it goes, so that's important to know. How many triangles are being used. It can get kind of cumbersome if there's too many, but that should work. So go ahead and put a second pin, let's say here, and then go ahead and put a couple more in this tentacle here. Maybe one at the end. Another thing you can do is lock. I'm going to put a couple more in this arm here. Okay, so what we can do, if you put your mouse over one of those, you can click and move those. And again, we can animate any of this. You have a lot of pins, and every one of them is animatable. So on your layer, press U, and you can see how many pins have been placed. Lots of them. Okay, so there's lots of keyframes already. But we're only going to focus on a few. If I click on this one, you can see that it highlights pin 6, 5, 4, and 3. Really, those are the ones that I want to animate. So I'm going to go to, let's say, I don't know, 1 second. And I'm going to move some of these pins around. And you can see that this thing is starting to move. I can move whatever I want to. Maybe go to 2 seconds. Don't get too out of control. This is just warping the image, so it might not look real good if you go too far. And then maybe I go to 3 seconds. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to copy my first frames, select them, Control C, and then go to the end, Control V. And hit N for end. So basically I just created a loop. You can see all the yellow points that are moving. So I just kind of brought this Photoshop file alive. What's weird is the movement. It looks like a robot. You know, we don't want that. So we can do a couple of things to help that. I'm going to select the beginning and end frames and ease them. I'm going to select the middle frames. I'm going to do something unique here. I'm going to right click and click Rove Across Time. And so what that's going to do, if you play it, it'll be a little more natural. We're going to dive into Adobe Illustrator this time. Import the folder Gears into your graphics folder. And you'll see that there's 3 files. And they have .ai, Adobe Illustrator. Illustrator is a different type of program. If you double click on one of these, it'll open Adobe Illustrator for you. And this program can take a lot of time to learn, and we'll dabble in it in time. But basically, this is a vector graphics program. This is a program that you can create really cool stuff like logos and really sharp geometric graphics in. Basically, this is just their shapes based on mathematics. There's no pixels. So I can zoom in and I will never lose quality. So if you needed to make something really, really big or something that had, you know, solid colors, this is a great program to make it in. So I made you guys some gears. If you're interested in learning more about this program, we can dive into it a little bit, but not too much. We're going to worry about animating these things. So going back into After Effects, I'm going to, I'm going to make a new composition. We're going to call this Illustrator. And I'm also going to write gears. Find some nice bright color. And hit OK. All right, let's import. Find my folder, Motion Graphics Training, Graphics, Gears. Okay, I want to import all 3. So you can click and drag and then hit open. and it imports Illustrator files. Do a little cleanup. Okay, so gear 1, 2, and 3 are all vector graphics, and the cool part about these, I'm actually going to set my work area to about 3 seconds. I'm going to bring in gear 1. The cool part about these is, and I don't want my puppet tool, is that you can make them large and you won't lose quality. With a bitmap image like the octopus, we were dealing with pixels, so you can't make it too large because then it'll look really bad. Let me show you what I'm talking about. If I made this small, and I'm at full quality right here, it looks decent. I can also make it large. And what does happen is it starts to get these pixelized edges, but this button right here will make it continually rasterized, meaning that you will never lose quality. So that's a good button to press when you have an Illustrator file. I'm going to hit scale and scale this to like 25%. And you know what? I'm going to make that a little larger. Drag it to the lower left-hand corner. Let's position this thing. Here's what's awesome about bringing in artwork. Notice that the anchor point is centered. We don't have to mess with it. Only when you're creating artwork in After Effects do you have to really fiddle with that anchor point. So that's kind of nice. Okay, I want this to turn. Obviously it's a gear. I want it to turn over 3 seconds. So I would hit R for rotate. At 0, I would hit rotation, the stopwatch. And then at 3, let's hit this little guy to add a keyframe, and let's rotate it, I don't know, twice. So I'm just going to type a 2 right here and enter. And that's going to turn clockwise. A positive number is clockwise. It's spinning so fast it's hard to tell, so I'm actually going to make that 1. Still pretty fast, but I think that'll work. All right, I'm going to drop the second gear on here. And I'm just going to kind of repeat. It's kind of up to you what you want this to look like. The teeth will not typically work. That is a whole other monster, so don't worry about them meshing. I'm just going to kind of position them like this. So again, I'm going to twirl down R for rotate, keyframe, keyframe. Maybe this one turns -1 because they're meshing. That looks pretty good to me. They're turning about the same rate. So you may have to mess with like 1, -1, 2, -2, and then I'm going to bring in a third one. This one, maybe I want it to be smaller and be right here. Again, I'm not going to have the teeth mesh, so I just want it to be smaller. Pressing Shift, hold the proportions, is very, very important with gears because they're basically round. If I made this thing an oval and I tried to rotate it, look at what happens. We don't want that at all. So you gotta press Shift. This is a great way to learn it. All right, so which way would this turn? This would turn negatively, I think. So I would go to my keyframe, go to the end, add a keyframe, and I'm going to say -1 on this one. Let's see. That's the right direction, but not nearly as fast as it should be. I'm going to go like -5, see if that works. A little fast. How about -3? These are full rotations. That's what this is. That looks pretty cool. You could fill up your entire page with gears if you wanted to. So it's kind of a cool look. But we are animating artwork from outside of After Effects. These are vector graphics that can be scaled infinitely. You'll never lose quality if you do this right. Another thing we can do is we can add an effect. So I'm going to add an effect called a fill. So I'm going to select my layer. We're going to go to Effect and Generate and Fill. And what this does is my effects controls, if you don't see them, you'll have to place them here. I think you guys can see them, but this is basically an effect that's on just this layer, and I can hide it, I can see it, And then I can control these things. Let's say I wanted my fill to be, I don't know, a different color. Maybe like a darker gray or dark blue or something like that. And now my black gear has been filled with blue. I can then copy this right here, Control C, go to my other gears, Control V for Victor, maybe change it up a little bit. This is an easy way to color things. So there are many, many, many effects that you can check out. That looks kind of cool. So importing graphics, rotating them, and adding effects to your layers. We're going to learn about importing Photoshop files and what the difference between a Photoshop file and a JPEG is. You'll need the Bowie folder from the Animation Network folder. You should have two images in there, Bowie JPG and Bowie PSD. They are two different files. So let's start a new composition in After Effects and call this Photoshop. And then I'm also going to say Bowie. I'm gonna make my background white this time and hit OK. Organize, 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 organize. And then I'm going to import those two files. So double click, find my folder, go inside Graphics, Bowie. Then I'm going to select both of them and hit Open. Okay, they should look a little different in the project folder right here. I'm going to put them in their proper folder. If you organize up front, it'll be less work down the road. Okay, so if I was to actually change my background, just watch this part before you do anything. If I was to import the Bowie JPEG, a JPEG doesn't have any transparency, so this white area right here is actually opaque or not see-through. If I was to import my Photoshop file, I've cut this out for you guys, and so it's different. A JPEG will never be transparent. It just can't be. A Photoshop file can be. So that's why Photoshop files are pretty neato. So I really don't need the JPEG. I just kind of wanted to do that to show you the difference. And go ahead and put Mr. Bowie so he's kind of coming out of the bottom here. Okay. If you don't have your resolution on full, go ahead and do that. You'll need to see it. Alrighty. We're not going to put a mask on him. We're going to put a shape layer on him, and we're going to change the color of it. And we're going to play with some blending modes. So make sure that your layer is not selected. Not like that. All right. Get your pen tool. And go ahead and draw around his little lightning bolt that he's got on his face. Just do your best. It doesn't have to be perfect. I'm not even using curvy lines. I'm just kind of drawing on top of it. It can go over his eye too, so whatever you feel. Okay, and it should draw a shape. You should have two layers now. I'm going to name this Enter, and I'm going to call this Bolt. All right, so you have two layers. You have this lightning bolt that you drew, and then a Photoshop file that we brought in. Okay, let's set the duration. We haven't done this yet. Duration of the lightning bolt layer. You can do this a couple of ways. You could select the layer and hit Alt right bracket, or you could hit Shift Control D and it will split the layer. Very handy. Splitting the layer. That's what I would recommend. So we're just going to do a lot of repetition here. For every 12 frames, what I want you to do is I want you to pick a color. So you're going to select your shape layer and pick a color. Let's stay with pink on this one. And then I want you to pull down this list where it says normal and choose one of these options. Okay, so you're going to go forward in time. 12 more frames would be at 1 second. Click this, Shift Command D to split my layer. Select the second portion right here. Maybe pick a completely different color and then choose one of these. Here's another way to scroll through this list. This is kind of cumbersome. So if you click on your layer, you can go Shift plus and toggle through them and find some cool stuff. It doesn't matter to me what it's doing. I want you to do this for, let's say, 5 seconds. So I'm actually go to 5 seconds and press N for my work area. I'm going to get back to it. So I'm going to go through, I'll speed this section up in the video, but basically you're doing the same thing. Selecting a layer, Shift Control D, select the layer, pick a different color, and then pick a blending mode. Shift plus will toggle through and repeat. When you're done, just play it back and it should shift colors on you. If it looks crummy like mine, that has to do with the preview settings. So if you really want it to look good at high quality, then you could tweak that setting. But basically this is a Photoshop file and you're drawing a layer on top of it, and then you're controlling the blend of that color with what's underneath it. You can blend in all sorts of programs like Photoshop, but After Effects is a very, very cool way to get some unexpected results of blending. And then we also learned how to split layers and organize them on our timeline. This is about null objects. We have two shapes that can be animated or moved independently. They're two different layers, but what if I wanted them to move as one actual controlling layer that could move multiple objects? So you can do that easily. You can right click, New, Null Object. This is basically an invisible thing. It won't render, it won't show up, but you can use it to attach things to and move them around together. This little thing right here is called a pick whip, and it works as a parent-child relationship. So we're going to use the null object as the parent, and then the child as what we're connecting to. So you just click and drag. You can click and drag to the name or the layer, and then this changes to the parent. You can also pull this list down and choose the parent. So when I move the parent, the children move. If I move the child, nothing moves. So they're linked basically. So that's a null object. It's very handy. You can animate the null object just like any other layer, but it acts like a controlling layer for any layer that you pick whip to or choose to. Precompositions or precomps can be very handy for organization. Basically, what you're doing is grouping your layers into something more simple. You're putting them into a group. So this animation, I have 7 layers of circles being animated, and you'll get these layers and you'll start building a project and it'll start getting complex. So how do you simplify things? This is one way to do it. I can make what's called a pre-comp. So I can select any layer. I'm going to select them all by clicking on the first one, pressing Shift, and clicking on the last one. I'm then going to right click on any of them and go to Pre-Compose. I'm going to name my pre-comp Circles. And now I have one layer that is called Circles. And if I double click on that, I'm back into all of the layers that I had before. But they're just basically grouped. It's also going to put something in your project window with the same name, Circles. If you can't find any layer, let alone a pre-comp, you can right click on it and go to Reveal Layer Source in Project, and it'll find it for you, but we could find it. So that's one way to group things and organize yourself. Once you get a lot of layers, it can really help clean things up.